Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome back to Marvel's Snap Zone. It's time for another weekly installment of our dedicated tier list segment, where we walk you through the best decks in Marvel Snap right now, and who is overperforming and who is underperforming in the current Marvel Snap metagame. Now, this week is going to be a little bit different for a number of reasons. First of all, courtesy of Steven in the official Discord server, we have confirmation that a balance patch will be coming alongside the battle mode patch and, of course, the series drop patch on January 31st. In case you haven't noticed, that means that today is one day before that balance patch change. So we are still releasing this tier list segment as of course it is super popular. But today we're going to be taking a look more in detail at how some of these decks that are performing right now might be impacted by the upcoming balance patch. So we can objectively look at them, maybe some of the cards we expect to be adjusted in them, and kind of take a hazardous guess at how they may continue to perform after a balance patch has been carried out. Secondly, unfortunately, this week's tier list is going to be a bit of a negative one. Zabu has clearly taken over Marvel Snap at both above and below the infinite rank. Considering how dominant these decks are right now, we could theoretically have a Zabu only tier 1 this week. It might have taken almost a month, but the entire community seems to have figured out that Zabu on turn 3 is almost always a snap, and there is no reason to risk your cubes if you don't have the signature card yourself. With this very simple principle, it's quite hard to lose cubes using a Zabu archetype, apart from the fact you should face exactly that basically all of the time. Zabu currently represents at least 40% of the metagame according to our tracker in both the 80 to 99 range and once you reach infinite. In fact, of players of a higher collection level, that number increases to above a 50% metagame share. Zabu Darkhawk and Zabucula combine to create about 30% of that, while Devil Dinosaur variants are the fastest growing in the game right now and already post a 10% popularity share. Now obviously, our tracker only represents part of the player base and cannot tell you the whole story, but it is the only data we have to work from for a concept like the tier list. Nevertheless, if you talk to players on social media or around you, your friends and family, you should see that Zabu is in most conversations and in most decks. Silver Surfer, Galactus, Death, these are all still very popular cards as well, all of them being among the most popular archetypes, but none of those cards or their archetypes even reach half of what Zabu currently represents. This leads to a metagame that really hasn't moved much this week. The most noticeable change, pairing Zabu with Devil Dinosaur to create the Zabu Handsize archetype. The deck combines the strengths of the Devil Dinosaur good card deck and a Zabu package together, and it doesn't really take you a veteran player to figure out that pairing should be quite strong when you combine a very strong deck with the strongest card in the game currently to net great results. Logically, it's propelled Devil Dinosaur and Moon Girl back into tier 1 this week, while giving Zabu yet another archetype to brag about. So, what can be done about it? To be transparent, I'm not sure yet. The explosivity of the second part of the game that Zabu tends to unlock feels impossible to match. Electro, Lockjaw, Mr. Negative, Silver Surfer, Patriot, these are all cards that still represent a good win condition in Marvel Snap, yet even with the perfect hand, it is very hard to not look at the retreat button when the opponent snaps on turn 2 or turn 3, and we know for sure that means Zabu is going to be hitting the board. As for the counters, Enchantress, Sandman, other cards that are able to impair Zabu, they feel too slow, coming down on turn 4, as the opponent managed to play 2 cards already and is ahead by now. Especially against the Devil Dinosaur variant, since it's going to be able to keep going with only 1 card per turn on turn 5 and turn 6. Overall, it feels like early disruption might be the best course of action for now, such as Iceman hitting Zabu, or Black Widow preventing it being drawn in the first place. This intro is pretty miserable, I admit. But part of reporting what is happening in a game on a weekly basis means that we have to cover every type of week. Nevertheless, we are getting that balance patch sometime tomorrow, so hopefully these rankings will change very, very soon. Until then, we're going to use this tier list to take a look at how the patch could change the complexity of the metagame in comparison to what it currently looks like, instead of the usual rank justification that we get, looking at how the patch might affect these decks instead. The key word there is might. I'm going to throw it up on screen really big so no one misses it. This is naturally going to be a very opinionated piece because we are looking at potentially how the future effects what we're showcasing you exists right now. And for that reason, please try not to roast us in the comment too much. We're doing our best to take our best guesses. Thanks so much. With all that said, let's take a look at this week's current tier list for Marvel Snap. As always, budget options do exist if you're looking to try and compete in the game without access to some Series 3, 4 or 5 cards. You can find deck lists for these exportable in the article in the description box down below. Tier 4 this week looks pretty much exactly the same as it did before. Ongoing Destroyer, Discard Lockjaw and Cerebro 2 proving to be options that are falling out of favour right now and don't really have much to say in terms of their competitive nature, but definitely stand to make a comeback if the metagame shifts significantly very soon. Again, we won't be writing up about these this week, but you are welcome to go get some more information about them and some exportable deck lists in the article in the description box down below. Tier 3 this week consists of most of the mainstays who are struggling to fight against Zabu's dominance right now. Hilariously, Zabu can be found here as well, however. Zerocula, Kazoo and Zabu Control, definitely two of the lesser performing decks in which Zabu is currently operating, giving them a Tier 3 berth this week. They are joined by She-Hulk Baero, still struggling with the existence of a prominent armor inside of the metagame, and Galactus, a deck that currently offers very polarizing opinions in the community overall, and could definitely end up somewhere else entirely following a balance patch. Tier 2 this week offers you the Leech Leader good card deck. You'll notice Devil Dinosaur suspicious in its absence from Tier 2 this week because adding Zabu to that deck has given it a Tier 1 berth this time around. So the Leader version, still viable, still playable, and finds itself firmly at the bottom of Tier 2. Lockjaw On Reveal, Patriot Surfer, and the downward ticking Shuri Zero find themselves completing Tier 2 this week as other viable options that do not contain the Battle Pass card. Tier 1 this week, of course, tells a pretty grim tale. Sera Surfer hanging on by the skin of its teeth as a viable contender to the dominance of Zabu right now, offering powerful play patterns many players are familiar with, but that's not always a upside. Many people retreating in haste when they are aware the Sera Surfer player is doing something that they cannot beat. The rest of Tier 1 here dominated by the Battle Pass cards, Zabucula, Zabu Handsize and Zabu Darkhawk, closing out this week's global tier list and just showing you exactly what Snap is all about right now. The silent performers of the week segment does remain, however. These are decks that are performing on the metrics we're looking for a tier list, with a positive win rate and a good cube average, but do not represent more than 1% of the metagame, and therefore do not provide enough data to be ranked accordingly. This week looks very similar to last week. Electro-Wong on Reveal, Thanos Zoo, and Negative Surfer finding their way into this segment this week. Not much has happened in Marvel Snap this week, mostly why these decks have stayed exactly here, but the patch could change a lot of things, and it could be a sign of the end of the road for Negative Surfer if we do receive a nerf to its signature card. I do, however, expect Thanos Zoo and Electro Ramp to gain a lot of percentage points, as neither deck should really be adjusted in the patch going forward. Thanos already performs quite well, and Thanos is a card that most people who decided to get it from the store are eager to play. The deck could definitely suffer from a return of Baero as a very strong deck, because Killmonger is a natural predator to what you're doing, but that will depend a lot on whether or not armor receives any kind of balance adjustment or not. Otherwise, Sera Surfer already plays Killmonger, so this deck reducing in popularity would be great news for Thanos all around. As for Electro, the card or the archetype that it pushes, it's very simple to use and often represents a comfort pick for many players when they're not sure what to play. Therefore, I can easily picture the deck gaining a ton of popularity right after the balance patch and becoming an early contender thanks to its simple play patterns and easy to grasp concepts. So let's start breaking down the tier 1 decks of the week. Zabu Darkhawk remains the best deck in Marvel Snap according to the stats. Just like it will be the case for any Zabu deck we talk about today, the deck will obviously suffer a huge blow if the namesake Battle Pass card itself is adjusted. This one is a little bit different though, as Darkhawk is another popular inclusion in the nerf discussion right now. For what it's worth, I've never seen a Darkhawk without Zabu in the deck, and considering the amount of Zabu decks currently, I don't think much would change if Darkhawk alone is the card that receives a touch. At worst, this particular archetype will fall from the list, only to be replaced by other Zabu archetypes. Overall, it will probably be the most impacted deck from the Zabu adjustment if we get one. The question is whether or not it will be from Zabu directly or from a card that benefits from it. Zabu Handsize is the new kid on the block, a new adjustment to a previously existing strong archetype, making the deck shine even more by adding this kind of package we are seeing everywhere into it. This is definitely the latest Zabu deck to emerge, but it's establishing itself as the best complementary win condition deck thanks to Devil Dinosaur. It helps a ton that both White Queen and Moon Girl are 4-cost cards, but I don't think these two need to be changed if Zabu is turned down a bit. A power loss for Devil Dinosaur wouldn't come as a shocker, especially now that Agent Coulson is gaining some popularity and establishing itself as the staple 3-cost card in the Handsize package. We now have a very stable turn 1 in Agent 13, turn 2 in Sentinel, turn 3 in Agent Coulson, turn 4 in Moon Girl and White Queen, and turn 5 in Devil Dinosaur, forming a group of 6 cards that can be slotted as a complement into almost any strategy that has enough space available. Currently, I don't really think there's a need to nerf if we look at power of this deck, but it could be done preemptively in order to avoid everyone defaulting to this after a balance patch. Zabucula, I think seeing this many decks with Zabu ranked so highly is a testament to Zabu being the problem here. A mile ahead of any other card included alongside it. With the card, we are seeing a resurgence in several marginally played Pool 3 cards, such as Dracula. Things like America Chavez from Pool 1, even Enchantress making a comeback thanks to Zabu. It's been great to see Zabu push for some diversity and make almost any 4-cost card worth considering in a deck list, but it's getting too much at this point. If the card isn't nerfed, this diversity will reduce in time as players unlock more cards and it becomes more clear what the superior deck is. Granted, Darkhawk is a Series 5 card which largely limits who can afford that one, but I don't think anyone wants the metagame to be Zabu Darkhawk against Zabu Pool 3, and that is exactly where we're currently heading. Sera Surfer is the other tier 1 deck of the week. Silver Surfer was in the exact same situation Zabu is currently in December and during the first weeks of January. I don't think it's possible to impact the Zabu archetype and not the Silver Surfer decks at the same time, as it would very likely result in going back to a month where Silver Surfer dominated without any form of competition. There are concerns on Battle Pass cards not being nerfed because players had to pay for them, and it would mean a huge backlash from those players. But I think there has to be a solution here for a fair compensation, like offering Modok in February to everyone who purchased Silver Surfer or Zabu, for example. Both cards are solidly anchored atop the Marvel Snap mountain, and changing one without the other really doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. The Zerocula Surfer archetype should not be done, even with a Silver Surfer nerf. Sera is a strong enough win condition to push for another core around that card. Time proved the card has enough resources to fall back on its feet, even if it loses its best allies so far. Overall, every deck in Tier 1 currently should be impacted by the upcoming balance changes, in our opinion. Tier 2 this week, Shuri Zero making its way down. Shuri might well be the biggest winner in the patch. as she arguably is the third best card in the game right now, but she's a little more discreet about it than the other two. As a result, there could be a scenario where Zabu and Silver Surfer are nerfed, and Shuri rises to dominate the field of play with her absurdly big Red Skull, Taskmaster, and She-Hulk plays. The deck does currently use Zabu, but it should be pretty easy to move on from a potential nerf to that card by including Maximus again, and maybe removing some Atuma or Typhoid Mary synergies, as the 4-cost cards would not be as strong anymore. Patriot Surfer finds itself a tier 2 berth once again this week. Patriot always in the conversation of solid decks in Marvel Snap, but has largely been overshadowed for the last 2 months. It was only after Silver Surfer joined the archetype that we saw a surge in the deck's popularity. Nevertheless, compared to Sera Surfer or Negative Surfer, a duo who build their entire strategy around the card, I think Patriot is best equipped to handle a nerf to Silver Surfer. It could just go back to being a full-on Patriot deck, or look for another secondary win condition. The build hasn't changed much during the week, which seems to indicate that players have reached some form of agreement as the best way to play it. Lockjaw On Reveal finds itself coming up next, and this is the first deck on our list I am confident about after the patch, since I don't see any reason why it should be impacted currently. Lockjaw is already showing good results, and it might be next in line to become the next best deck in the game, depending on how hard everything else can get hit. Of course, other archetypes will return as well, but Lockjaw is great at being unpredictable and playing around the good cards archetype, another deck that should rise with the patch, as it became a comfort pick for a lot of players. Considering the deck re-emerged recently, there are still various takes on how to approach this archetype. You should either look to go in the safer direction shown on screen, or you could aim for more potential if you prefer. There's even a build around Thanos that uses the Infinity Stones to abuse Lockjaw instead. Leech Leader, the good cards priority deck, the archetype in the eye of the storm the last time that nerfs were on the menu. We all expect Leader to be adjusted a second time, thanks to Ben Brode basically promising as much during the first balance patch of the month. The good card archetype isn't very popular right now, at least not compared to Zabu or Silver Surfer. However, I don't think anyone wants to go back to an Aero plus Leader metagame that we had prior to Silver Surfer taking over. As a result, most decks, including Leader as the default win condition, might be hit just as hard as the Battle Pass cards. There are some other great cards to include as replacements. Things like Magneto, Doctor Doom, and Aero might not be nerfed a second time, so there's no need to count out the good card archetype completely just yet. Tier 3 this week starts off with Galactus remaining exactly where it was before. Already nerfed in the last patch, I don't really expect Galactus or Null to be part of this one unless Second Dinner finds themselves concerned with the play patterns that Galactus tends to create. A card that you could be worried about power-wise for this archetype, however, is Death, a long-time entry on the list of cards who are extremely strong in the right deck or scenario. Either way, if Galactus has to go against fewer Zabu decks, it should also mean fewer Spider-Man decks, and that alone is an incredible piece of news for the Destroyer of Worlds. She-Hulk Baero is the deck I'm kind of scared about after the patch. The Destroy synergy was really only kept in check by Leader and Armor currently. We already know that Leader should see a change, which opens the door to those insane play patterns of Wave on turn 5 and Death, She-Hulk and another card on turn number 6. If Armor is part of the nerfed cards as well, for example change to a 2-2 like some players believe might be the case, while Death isn't on the list with them, we might be in for the comeback of early 2023. We have heard rumours of Killmonger being changed from some translation changes in the previous patch, so the Deathwave Baero archetype should be the one to follow closely if you're keeping your eyes on a deck prior to the balance patch. Zabu Control is indeed down here as well. It seems obvious at this point that a reactive list isn't Zabu's strongest suite, and most decks around the card are flexible enough to include Shang-Chi or Enchantress anyway, without dedicating yourself to the cause. I expect this archetype to go back to what it was with Sera as the anchor for a flexible turn 6 if Zabu is the card impacted. Otherwise, this archetype could likely just disappear over time, as other ones are simply stronger overall. Zerocula Kazoo is similar to Electro. Kazoo has my curiosity going into the patch for a number of reasons. It's a great comfort pick for lots of players if the game is shaken up, as everyone needs to find a new deck to play if that happens. Killmonger also potentially could be changed in the patch, and that could mean a lot for a deck like this, as it would reduce the threat of the deck's worst enemy. I think overall the confirmation of a balance patch alongside the arrival of battle mode and the card drop really should feel like a blessing, as it should allow a clean slate to gauge the new feature overall. Several tournaments have already been announced for the start of February, and I was a little worried by how they would be perceived in the current environment. In the end, Marvel Snap is still very young, and the introduction of a new feature is a key step in the growth of the game. It would be a shame to see it mitigated by a controversial metagame at the same time. I focused a lot on the cards that would make sense to be nerfed in the balance patch this video, but the best part of an update often are the buffs. In that regard, a ton of possibilities can be imagined, and only one can wish that we get as many changes as we did back in September if the devs can grace us with the best balance patch in Marvel Snap since then. The patch will be here very, very soon, so we won't have to wait long to discover what those changes are. We will of course report on everything about it, and we might write a little something on what the changes could mean in the metagame in the short run as well, to kind of cover us until the next tier list. Until then, thank you to everyone for tuning in to this piece of content as always. If you want to offer your feedback, by all means leave a comment in the comment section down below. Come and find the entire Marvel Snap Zone team over in the Marvel Snap Zone Discord server and talk Marvel Snap 24 hours a day with thousands and thousands of other players. Alternatively, you could find each member of the team on Twitter personally if you prefer, over at Marvel Snap Zone, at HowlingMines, or at DenCCG. Until next time, I have been HowlingMines, you have been amazing, and this has been Marvel Snap Zone. Take care. Have a good one.